There we go. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Google Workspace Accessibility, hosted by the Maryland Department of Disabilities IT Accessibility Initiative Program uh, or Initiative. We are under the Maryland TAP or Technology Assistance Program. And today we're going to go over the basics of Google Workspace, how a blind or low vision user is going to work within that space, kind of give an example of how they use Gmail, Google Docs, slides, and sheets, and then talk about how you can work with those and work collaboratively with those individuals. And making sure to remember to do certain things like add alt text or headings, um, and some general usage practices that make the experience better for everyone. We'll touch on document accessibility simply because of the nature of what we're talking about, but I'm not going to go into terribly much detail. So if there's specifics you want to know about making documents accessible, please refer to some of our older webinars, or you can reach out to me at mdod.nva@maryland.gov. That's our group email, and we can discuss that topic further. For now, a couple quick housekeeping items. We have captioning available today. I see our captioner has provided a link in the chat for people to use if they want to view it separately, or it is integrated into Zoom, and you can press the closed captions button on your menu ribbon. Today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be on our YouTube channel, hopefully by Friday. If not, it will be on by next week. And there will be some links I will be providing to people. I will make sure that goes out with the recording as well. So if you don't get it in the chat, if you miss it, don't worry, you will get all of the resources I talk about today. Let's see, there was one other thing I want to go over. Okay. Nope, that's actually it. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen. And there we go. Oop. Hold on. I need to redo that because I need to share sound. All right. There we go. That should be working. So this is, if you recognize, is the standard Gmail workspace. We're going to start with Gmail because most of the time, this is the first thing most people, when they sign in for work, will look at. Now, there used to be an HTML only version available for Gmail that a lot of blind and low vision users preferred because it was simpler and it was an easier interface for assistive technology to interpret. They got rid of that, unfortunately. So now we are working with this specific tool. So everything I'm going to talk about really is just focused on this. For most of us, I think we've gotten fairly used to, at least in the state, you should be used to working with the standard inbox on the left with the compose. You have your account in the top right, and then you have on the sidebar on the right, you have some of your extra tools and such. Now, a couple settings that are going to be applicable here. I'm going to open settings, and then I'm going to, instead of using quick settings, I'm going to say see all settings as the first button under there. The first thing I want to point out that it is very important for assistive technology user, a screen reader user, or those with physical disabilities who only use a keyboard, or just in general, sometimes people prefer this, is keyboard shortcuts under the General tab. I should turn this on because this allows use of the shortcuts Google has put into Gmail. So in the case of getting to the inbox, it would be G then I. Pressing G, pressing I at the same time. To compose a new email, it's just press C, that kind of thing. Those are off by default. So you definitely want to let users know this is a setting that needs to turn on. You can learn more about these from the link under there. I'm just going to hide my control panel there. that will take you to this link. And let me share this link with you all. There we are. So this link has all of the shortcuts for Gmail. There are a lot, so I'm not going to touch on them. I would encourage you to just go looking through this, but it has it for different areas, such as getting to the composition or the chat windows, adding a link, sending a message. They have ones for moving to inbox, to different labels you might have, or your drafts. And then they have one just for getting to navigation in the thread itself. So very useful. They also give the ability to customize them. So if for whatever reason they overlap with any of your tools or with other shortcuts you might have, you can change them to fit your needs. So really useful article. Definitely should try it out for just general purposes, because some of these shortcuts do make things a lot easier. Now, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to cancel out of this. Is I'm going to start up my NVDA, my screen reader. It takes a moment to launch.
Taskbar.
So that is NVDA, non-visual desktop access. It is an open source screen reader. Pretty robust. It's fairly comparable to JAWS, Job Access with Speech. Those of you who work in this sphere or have worked with someone with blindness or low vision, you might have encountered JAWS before. But NVDA is quickly becoming very popular because it's an open source one that's pretty good. The last WebAIM survey that was just done this past year in January, you might have seen us send out a message about it. Their results showed that it's pretty much on par with JAWS in terms of usage now. Part of that is because people are using both. They use JAWS at work, and they use NVDA at home, because then they don't have to pay for 2 licenses or what have you, that kind of thing. But it is a very good tool for learning how to use a screen reader, and then also just in general purposes. So Gmail, like most websites, hopefully, is split into different landmarks or different regions. So a screen reader user is probably going to use the shortcut D to get to different regions on the page. So let me make sure I'm focusing this.
Oh. Busy. About.
What just happened
navigation.
there was it jumped straight to the list of things, and because that beep is NVDA entering focus mode, so when I press D, it didn't do the actual shortcut for the screen reader, it did the shortcut for Google. And that's what happened there. So apologies, didn't mean to do that. I was going too quickly. So what I'm going to do is switch to browse mode, which is the insert and space, or NVDA key and space. Now I can press shortcut D to move from region to region. So I'm going to press Shift D to move back to inbox.
Navigation landmark compose button.
So now I'm in the navigation menu for Gmail. So I can use the down
Clickable
arrow.
Heading level 2 label. Visited link inbox. Clickable link start.
To move through these different boxes I have in order to select the one I want. Then I can press D
Main
again.
landmark conversations heading level 2.
So there's an invisible heading there for conversations to let screen reader users know this is what this next section is going to be. It also provides that navigation landmark for screen reader. That's why you don't see that focus box, and you might be able to see like it up in the top left corner, that little red dot. That's because visually there isn't anything there to focus on. They've moved that element kind of out of the way, but it is useful for purposes of getting to this section quickly.
Clickable table with 32 rows and 8 columns, row 1, column 1.
So if you hear that it's acting as a table now we're at the list of emails, and this is where they want you to use focus mode, or as I like to call it, edit mode. The reason for that is because Google has set it up so that a screen reader will interpret this whole section as a thread or a topic rather than try to read each individual part of this whole display. So now I can move through these emails with my arrow key. So I press down arrow.
Stephen Polasek MD. Invitation, check-in.
So it'll read who the email was from, it'll read the subject, and then it'll read the date. So it'll read that whole line for me. I don't have to go through and find each individual part. It will instead just let me read all of the emails, the summary of them easily. So that is the general experience of a screen reader user here. Now, because I'm in focus mode, the Google shortcuts are applying. So if I want to compose a new email, I can press C and it'll
Compose, new
start a new
message dialog,
email.
new message.
And so now if I didn't want to do that, if I want to use the screen reader shortcuts, I have to remember to switch my mode in order to do that. So there's a little bit of a learning curve working with Google, in that you do need to learn that there's now two sets of shortcuts and you have to switch modes to get to the one you want. So sometimes, as you saw me do earlier, if you press the button and you're thinking you're in one mode, you open a new panel and you're like, I didn't mean to do that. So just keep that in mind. But other than that, like once you're in focus mode and you can use the Google shortcuts, there's a long list of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, and you can learn how you can use these just in general usage, and then also how a screen reader user is going to use them, um, and then switch modes in order to get around. So I am now going to turn off NVDA and I'll talk a bit about composing an email.
Taskbar.
All right.
Forwarded.
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Inbox, sgp.access testing.
Trying to get it to turn off. I
Inbox,
apologize.
sgp.access testing at gmail.com. Inbox, okay, inbox, sgp.access.
There we go. Apologies to our captioner. That was not intended, but sometimes the computer doesn't always, keep up, or restarts. Anyway, so now I want to talk a little bit about working with Gmail and making your emails more accessible for blind and low vision users. A lot of this is kind of the same general applications that you hear about with documents and such. Formatting is very important. When you're writing a list in your subject line, a lot of people might just use a dash and then write in, their first item, and then they put a dash and list item 2. It's really important that you use the formatting options. Right next to send is the formatting options button. You have your preferences here. Bulleted list is third to last button on this ribbon here. Depending on your screen width or whatever, there's probably more buttons available. You can also use the shortcut Control-Shift-8. That's there. Or you can make a numbered list with Control-Shift-7. And this way, you actually have that formatting so that your screen reader will actually read that as a list. So it makes things uh, make more sense. Oops, I just did this backwards. For a screen reader user. So it's really helpful to have that formatting available. One thing I also want to point out, or a couple other things I want to point out, is there is text size. A user can change this on their end, so it's not as drastic, but it is something to be in mind is that you really don't want to ever use the small format. From pretty much anyone, no one likes, I've yet to meet someone who actually likes the small text format. But just be aware of that these will impact how you when you're writing, how things might be laid out and such. So, if you use normal or large, that's fine. As I said, users might change it on their own end, depending on their browser settings. So just be aware of that. Um, with fonts, I have yet to hear if anyone's really had any issues with fonts. I know I've been asked before. Generally, um, what I've seen and heard is that your default with sans serif or serif is fine. Um, Beyond that, you know, all of these really shouldn't have any issues for anyone in any way. Um, you might get, some some eyebrows raised if you're using Comic Sans, but uh, in general, if you were at all curious, to my knowledge, your font choices here shouldn't really have an impact. Um, Now, the last thing, or now I want to talk about adding alt text. So I'm going to pull up, here's our newsletter that you all saw. Hopefully, that's maybe how you heard about today's webinar. Now, this was made in Constant Contact. The nice thing about using those is that we're able to add things like headings and descriptions and such. It's really useful. Um, so in the case of this larger email, because it's broken into these sections here, each of these like titles for a webinar is a heading. So a screen reader user can use the shortcut to move through this quickly if they recognize this email. They'll be like, oh, it's the monthly newsletter. And they can press H to just move quickly to news and announcements, ITAI webinar series, Google Workspace accessibility, and it'll jump them down to NFB SINA, Access Boutique series, basics of PDF remediation. That's next week, by the way. Keep that in mind. Um, uh, and so they can find out quickly what they're looking for. They don't need to try and read through everything just to find out what are we offering this week. So very useful to do. It's kind of like how you would for an electronic document. The other thing is that you can, or most, should let you add alt text. Now, the nice thing is that Google also does this too in your email. So if you're just composing a general email, if I do this now, if I bring up a picture and put it in here, let me grab our logo. And if I copy that into here, now, if I scroll down, let me get rid of the formatting so you can see this easier. If I click it to highlight it, there's a little ribbon underneath um, that should also announce to a screen reader user when it comes up that says small, best fit, original size, edit alt text, and remove. So you can change the size of the image when you copy it into the body of the email. So I can make this a smaller image, but then I can also edit its alt text. I will get this pop-up that lets me add a description. So I can change this instead of a file name, I can say MDTAP logo. Or if I'm sending this maybe outside of our organization to someone who might not know of us, I can say Maryland Assistive Technology. If I can spell today, program logo. So I can change that description to what I want it to be. And when a blind user receives this email, they'll hear that alt text, since this is all HTML based. So keep that in mind if you're sending emails. It really doesn't take that much effort, as you notice. Like you click it, you can write in a very short description or something. But it makes a big difference, especially if you're doing like announcements to your team, your department, or even more broadly than that, because you don't know who your audience is in those cases, or there might be someone that is new or isn't aware of it, or is maybe even stripping out images because of Google's security filter. And in their cases, they'll see the alt text instead of the image. Otherwise, they'll just see a broken icon. So really useful just in general purposes as well. So any user who reads through our newsletter should hear those descriptions for each of our images. Beyond that, again, I would just recommend that you use just the general, good formatting practices. Use bold to highlight text, but don't make it headings because then we're having multiple headings that are getting in the way and such. Um, and then the last thing is links. When you put a link into an email, really consider using link text instead of the URL. This isn't so much a requirement as more it's just easier for people because if you're not using like a URL shortener or something, some URLs can get really long if you notice, especially in this day and age where you have these strings of 200 characters. Like Google right here is this big long string of letters and numbers. So for most people, it's going to be easier if you just make the text the link itself. So if I wanted to, let me grab one of these links here. In an email, I can say JAWS resources for Gmail. And then I can highlight it. And the way I quickly highlight it there is I hold Control and Shift and press up arrow, which highlights that whole line backwards from the cursor. If I wanted to do it from if the cursor was in the front and I wanted to highlight downwards, I would do Control Shift down. Um, and then I can press Control K and I can add a link to this. It can either be web email or a web or an email address. Um, if it is an email address, make sure to click that because then it adds a little mail to uh, code snippet to the front of it so that when a user clicks it, it automatically starts a new email rather than just try to open it as a website. You can change the text here if for whatever reason you need to. If you notice a spelling error or if you want to change the text display, what have you. But I can add the link here. So instead of a user hearing, if I put this next to it, instead of a user hearing JAWS resources for Gmail, HTTPS, / www freedom scientific / blah, 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 they'll hear JAWS resources for Gmail link. So they know where the link is going to take them, but they don't have to listen to this convoluted URL that might not always tell them where it's going because the screen reader tends to focus on the end part of the URL, and that can be whatever is needed there. So that's why it's kind of recommended to get into this habit. It also helps other users too, because especially if you have something that's a really long URL, um, like that's multiple lines that can take up a good chunk of the page, then this is a lot easier than trying to look at that entire link and realize and remember what it's for. Um, okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Um, so that's kind of the basics I want people to remember for Gmail. Uh, there is, more to it. I don't have chat. This is a separate account, really for testing purposes and demonstration purposes. So I don't have like chat or anything like that. Um, but chat does work with a screen reader too. My colleague who is blind has said that it's workable was his definition. Um, it's easier on phone. He has mentioned that. I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end of the presentation, but just be aware that from my understanding, Google Chat, while it can be very useful, can also be problematic for users because it doesn't respond all that great to screen readers, at least on desktop. Okay, now let us get into Drive and Workspace, the rest of it. So Drive and its various parts, slides, docs, sheets, what have you, uh, is kind of the same setup. but it doesn't require you to turn on keyboard shortcuts. They're kind of already there, which is pretty helpful. Now I'm going to start up NVDA again. So give me just a moment for that to start up.
Taskbar.
Okay.
Home. Home. Google Drive.
So there is the same kind of setup where that beep indicates that it's gone into focus mode because it starts focus in the main content region. So same kind of setup as Gmail is if I want
2 items.
to
March 2024.
look through my files, I can just arrow down.
March 2024 slides demonstration Google Slides you modified bullet March 13th.
So it'll read that whole line for me and tell me what that item is. If I want to get to the navigation bar or if I want to get to settings, I need to switch back to browse mode manually in order to move to those regions. So let's do that quick.
Clickable navigation landmark folders and views heading level 2. Tree view clickable level 1 link home. Clickable 880 megabytes of 15 GB used. Tree view clickable 8 tree view out of link out of clickable 880 folders.
There we go.
My drive collapsed.
Sorry, I forgot I need to switch back into that mode when I get to here again. But this way I can
Computers
get
collapsed
to
3 of 9 level
like,
1 shared with me.
if I want to look through documents other people have shared with me, I need to go to this region and click that separately. But other than that, behaves kind of like Gmail in the same manner. So if I went to get back to the region,
Home, Google Drive.
so now I'm in home. I'm at that heading at the top
Clickable
there.
880 link get more home. Toolbar list radio out of tool one button button more name
through all
reason
of these.
suggest location table with 20.
And now here
Main
I want
landmark
to switch back
table
to focus mode so that I'm able to move through these. So same kind of navigation. Keyboard user is probably going to do the same things. Oh, I should mention one other thing I should mention, and actually let me get back to this quickly. I should have done this before.
Clickable banner landmark drive navigation landmark accessibility feedback.
So one of the requirements, basic requirements for accessibility is a skip to main content link at the start of a page in order to move past like navigation menus or repeated content. A number of organizations, Google included, like to include other shortcuts with that link, such as the keyboard shortcuts link you're seeing now and the accessibility feedback link. Gmail has one as well. Right after the skip to main content link will be the using a Gmail with a screen reader article, which if you notice, I have a tab open with that. That's another link I want to provide at the end. So that way a user, when they first get to Gmail, if they're not really familiar with it or need access to that link, it's available to them from there. Just something kind of important that I wanted to show off. Now, back to what I was doing. Apologies.
Banner landmark drive, navigation landmark skipped, no previous landmark.
Nope.
Banner land, search, clickable navigate, main landmark clickable, side panel, no next land, main landmark clickable, clear share button. Tape, my drive button. New press.
There we go. All right.
2 items.
So now let's
March
go
2020.
into an actual document.
Work, alert Firefox prevented this. Option. Alert fire, allow, home, Google Drive Mozilla Firefox.
I cheated there. I used the
Application.
mouse. Ignore that, please. just need to get past it. I forgot it.
On page 1.
Firefox still had that setting. All right. So now we're in Google Docs. So like most word processors, you have various tools available to you for formatting purposes, inserting images or tables or such. But a critical thing with Google Docs, and the same applies to slides and sheets, is we need to actually enable screen reader support. So the way this is done is you go to Tools, or you can press Control Alt T, or no, Alt Shift T, I apologize.
Tool sub menu 6 of 9.
So the shortcut to get to any of those ribbon items is Alt Shift and its letter. And again, you need to be in focus mode for a screen reader to do this. But keyboard shortcuts should be enabled by default in Drive, as I mentioned. So this should work for anyone. But the key thing here is that accessibility tool, that last item in the list. We need to go to that. And
Link.
I'm just going to try and speed
Preferences.
through that
Accessibility
quick.
C1. Accessibility.
So it'll open this pop-up, accessibility settings, with turn on screen reader support. If you don't do this, or if a user doesn't do this, the screen reader is just going to read everything inside as blank. So if someone you're working with mentions that, help them set this up. If you want to test your document and see how it's reading with a screen reader, you'll need to enable this. But this is a personal settings thing. So once you've turned this on, you should have it enabled in your documents in Google for at least this browser, if not across your account. So ultimately, I would just leave it on because it doesn't really interfere with anything, even if you're not using a screen reader. But realize that it's only for you. It's not for other people. They'll need to do it themselves. But if you want to ever test or experience this, you'll need to turn that on. I don't know if any of the third-party extensions we'll talk about a little bit at the end need this setting on, but I would surmise that they do. So yeah. Excuse me. A couple other things. Braille support. That means for users who are using a Braille display that connects to their computer in order to read it instead of the screen reader vocalizing it, or maybe they're doing both. That needs to be turned on separately, as you see there. And then turn on collaborator announcements. So what that means is when multiple people are working on a document, the screen reader or Google is going to tell the screen reader, announce that Bob Smith has joined or has entered the file and is editing here. That depends, that screen reader users report mixed results with that, because it's very helpful if, to know when your boss has joined it or another team member has joined it and is working on it. But it can be incredibly annoying if there's 10 people all looking at this document at the same time, like during a webinar. So just be aware of that fact. That's what that does, and it's a personal preference whether it's turned on or not. But with that,
Okay. H.
Screen
Tab.
reader can now
Tab.
enter, work with the document itself. So I can start writing, this is a demonstration document.
This is a demonstration document.
And screen reader can read that. If I did not have screen reader support enabled, the cursor would still move, but they would just hear blank. So really important for that purposes. Now, let's see. Let me turn off NVDA again.
Note over NVDA.
And talk a bit more about
Bluetooth. Okay. March.
There we go. Now let me talk a bit more about making documents accessible. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail about making a document accessible. We cover that to far greater degrees in other webinars, but I'm going to mention where the tools are that you're going to be using to do a lot of those things. So like any word processor, you have a formatting bar at the top here. In this case, Google starts with undo and redo and search menus, but you have preset styles in the second grouping is a drop down. So for applying headings, this is where you do this. You can't just, increase font size and make it bold in order to make a heading. So you need to instead actually add demonstration. You need to actually highlight the text you want, change its formatting, and apply it. Or you can get to a new line and apply it there and start writing it here. So discussing heading menus. Nice thing about this also is if I open up the summary on the left sidebar, you have an outline here and all your headings appear here too. So anyone can use these in order to quickly move around the document. Very useful for really large documents. When I write testing reports, if I'm working with another team member, especially now with the Department of IT having their Office of Accessibility and doing testing as well. If we're working together on a document, this is really useful because I can come in and I can click the heading for where I'm going to enter my data versus maybe Matt, who is going to jump to the screen reader section and enter his information there. So we can break it up that way and quickly move around the document, especially because those reports can get 8 to 10 pages long. So it's a lot easier than trying to scroll through down or jump through all the headings. I can just use that outline to quickly get to where I want to go. Any user can do that. Very useful for screen readers as well as uh, sighted users or voice control users. I believe that they can say click the menu button over here. So that is how you add headings, and you can see your heading structure. And if you notice, they're indented, so that means this is heading 1, this is heading 2. Different levels of headings will appear on different levels, so you can kind of see the structure that you've put into your document, and sometimes you can see if you've messed up a heading level or something. Once these are headings, though, I can change this to look however I want. I can make this Comic Sans, even though I don't like that font, and I can make it bold or italic and bold. But it's still a heading. It still functions as a heading. So I can make this look however I wish with no issues, but it will still function how I need it to. Now, with alt text, if we insert an image, I'm going to go grab that logo again from my computer. Insert this. If you notice now, a few more options down here, but we don't have the same options we have in Gmail. Instead, it's how it's going to appear with text. If it's going to be floating or if it's going to be in line with text. Like Word, it's usually better to have it in line with text because if it's floating, it might not actually read in where you want it to read. So it's the kind of thing that you really should check. But you can open size or rotation or adjustments, but you want to use all image options because that opens this menu. And this is where you can add alt text to your image. You can also right click and there is alt text, or you can use the shortcut Control Alt Y. These will instead, well, if this wasn't here, this would open a dialog for that. Oh, no. Okay, that's new. As of a week ago, it would open a dialog. Now it apparently opens this on you. So be aware of that. Google changes things. Get ready for that. Sometimes it's a surprise. Yay. Um, and this is where you would add that description. And it automatically saves it. So I don't have to do anything other than type it in there. And if I need to like manually change size or change, if I wanted to really mess with the image or whatever, I can do that here as well. Or I can just do the click and drag thing as I would in Photoshop or Illustrator. So that's how you add alt text to images. And then tables, you can enter a table. The thing about this is it's kind of the same way of you would in Word, is you go to table properties and in column row, there it is, pin header row. That's how you add the header row so that you have heading cells to tell screen readers what the column data is. Um, Unfortunately, in Google Docs specifically, you don't have a way to do that with like a first column the other way. But you still at least want to do a heading row so that we have, uh, when a screen reader defines that as a table, because sometimes you have to do that with these, they will hear that data association you want them to hear. So that is Google Docs. Just a short, quick summary of it. Slides and sheets. Let me open both of these quick for us. The menus are by and large the same. You use the same kind of shortcuts. If I want to, uh, if I need to turn on the accessibility, I just need to turn it on again over here. In this case, let's do that. Okay. So now I have screen reader support enabled on my computer in my account for this for slides. This should apply to any other slides thing I've applied or opened or created. Um, but I need to do it at least once. But you need to do it separately for each of the tools in Google Workspace. It's not just do it in Docs and it applies to everything. It will only apply to its specific area. So if you notice, there's no accessibility menu here in Sheets yet. Um, there are some other options here in accessibility for each of these that you can uh, go and test if you're interested in. I'm not going to talk about them so much because they're mostly things like if you notice verbalizing or go to a specific area or what have you. Um, so they're kind of more like settings or nav jumps rather than uh, changes or making things more accessible. Um, the couple things I want to talk about with slides is kind of the same thing we mentioned with I'm just going to choose a quick theme. Um, um, with docs is if I want to add an image or if I want to, I change the layout. Do, 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 do. Two columns. If I want to insert an image, upload. Logo. And change this down to a size, throw that over here. Same thing for alt text, Control Y. I can add alt text here. Same setup as docs. Um, the thing with slides though is there isn't yet really a way to determine reading order. Instead, Google will use the layout that you choose. So with like a standard slide, it'll read title first and then it'll read text. But in this case, because I added this image separately from the layout, it will just add this on as the last item in the list. So this slide would read title, text box 1, text box 2, and then empty tab logo. So that's something to be aware of is unlike PowerPoint where you had that list of elements to read through and change slides or change to fit how you want a screen reader to interpret it. You can't really do that with Google in its default form. So be aware of that is that add things in the order you want people to read them. That's your simplest way to deal with it. You can download it as a PowerPoint and then fix it there. That's what I tend to do. But uh, by default, if you're like creating a slideshow with someone's help, um, this is how you're going to have to handle it. Beyond that, a lot of everything else is kind of taken uh, is handled. Titles act as headings. You have the slides that will read individually. Um, for a screen reader user, if they want to go to speaker notes, they have to open it with this. That'll jump them down to the notes section here. My captions are in the way. Uh, and that will jump them to the notes section here. Um, and you can add notes there, kind of like how you do a PowerPoint. Um, you don't really have a way to check anything like color contrast and such. So just be aware of when you're choosing a theme. Um, most of these, I think, are pretty okay. They're pretty simple. Uh, this one might have a little trouble. Um, that I would be a little suspicious of for color contrast, but most of the default themes I think are pretty okay for color contrast and such. But it is the kind of thing to just think about when you're looking at a theme or you're making alterations to a theme. Um, is there isn't a way to check those and there's no alert in here. So it is something you have to manually do yourself. And then lastly, sheets. Uh, tools, accessibility, turn on support. Da-da-da. Boom. Okay. So with sheets, a lot of it functions like Excel in that you have the menus, but you don't have the formatting where you can add, cell headings kind of. Instead, you have the freezing row where I go to, hold on. I had to move my camera window. I apologize. There we go. We need to instead view more that. Right click it, open the context menu, view more row actions, and then we want to freeze up to a row. And I think we can do that with columns in here. Yes, we can do that with columns as well. So Sheets does let you have that setup of headings on top row and columns as well. And uh, the way you do it is by freezing that row. Now, a screen reader user will have to, and this is what my colleague told me with JAWS, will go in and define the table and say, we'll press, I believe he said, here it is. Yes, he will use Control Asterisk to select a region and then Control T to define a table region. This is just default part of Excel and Sheets. So this should work with JAWS and NVDA. I've tested a little bit. Still I'm still learning how to use it. So that's why I'm not demonstrating it here, also for time purposes. But it is how you can set up data in here, freeze those rows, and then the screen reader will know, use these frozen rows as the headings for that data relationship. If you're doing multiple tables, uh, one of the recommendations that's usually made is, saying edge of table or end of table next to it, just so users understand that this blank cell area is somewhere else. You might want to, if you're doing like a more complex thing, like I see for like forms or for budgets, I will see like multiple tables scattered around. Usually it's a good idea to add like little notes. You can insert comments with Control Alt M or the comment button, which is 5th from last button on the menu ribbon. And you can use comments to add, you know, go to table in cell M10 or whatever. That way users understand, okay, I've reached the end of this table and I need to go to here in order to get to the next set of data or whatever, especially if there's like blank sections in between and such. Otherwise, you're kind of forcing users to try and have to guess or move around randomly and find it randomly and then have to reorient themselves when they do find it. So kind of provide those extra little instructions to help direct people. Um, Useful for anyone, again, because especially if you're handing this to someone new or to someone who hasn't worked with it before, and they can use those to try and like follow your thought process with the document. Comments do read to screen reader users. They can go to them, they can open them up and read them, so there's no worries about those. So that is everything I wanted to talk about with those three documents. it is I apologize. It is, kind of a quick summary. There's a lot more we can talk about with these, but it comes down to a lot of the same practices with accessible documents. Um, it's just the tools you have are in slightly different locations, and you have to turn on the table support or the screen reader support and such. Uh, there are a couple links um, for more detailed information. I also have like keyboard shortcuts and cheat sheets that I want to provide to you. So Freedom Scientific has one that I mentioned earlier. That is uh, for all of Google. The Gmail has one that is a pretty useful guide for using Gmail with the screen reader. There's also some more information about how to make some stuff more accessible in Gmail for users, or things to think about while you're drafting emails. Um, Last thing I want to mention is using any kind of accessibility checker. Uh, Gmail and Google Docs and Slides and Drive and all of those other parts don't have a built-in one. Um, so you have a couple options. One is to download it into Office and use their accessibility checker. If you want to run something like that on your document to make sure everything's okay. Um, or as I mentioned with PowerPoint, downloading your slides into PowerPoint so that you can rearrange the reading order if for whatever reason you're not sure about it or you're concerned about it. There are third-party extensions for it. Grackle is the one I hear about the most. I have yet to try it out. I've been planning to, um, but a couple other people I've worked with have used it and reported pretty okay results. So it's at least somewhere to start with. So I would consider that. There are others out there, but Grackle is the one I've heard the most about. I still kind of tend to default though to pulling it into another program and checking it more thoroughly there. Um, oh, thank you. Someone in chat has mentioned Grackle will also make accessible PDFs from docs. So that's very useful information. Thank you. Um, that is really useful to know because Office can kind of do the same thing where it can export its tags to PDF. So to hear that Grackle can do that from docs is fantastic because docs won't do that. So very good information. Last thing I want to mention is mobile apps, the mobile apps on your phone for Google. Um, my colleague had mentioned them because he has find them easier to use, especially with a screen reader. They have a better or simpler interface, so there's kind of less jumping around from navigation point to navigation point and trying to organize a list. Everything's kind of separated into a larger menu. So he kind of prefers that. It is something that we could touch on in a future webinar if enough interest is generated. So please let us know if you're interested in us touching on the mobile side. I focused, excuse me, I focused on desktop today because most of us are using either a laptop or a desktop to work. And I am talking in the context of the state where most of our or all our work is in the Google Workspace or can be. So I wanted to kind of focus on that area. But if people are interested, we can talk more about the mobile apps and their accessibility and working with them to make things accessible if people are interested. But that's everything I had for today. So if you have any questions, feel free to add them in chat or in Q&A, and I will try to answer them with the few minutes we have remaining. Oh, someone has raised their hand. Okay, you should be allowed to talk.
Hi, I just have a quick question. It's probably a
Sure.
simple question,
No
but
problem.
with regarding to using the headings
Yes.
um, in a document, should we use a heading for each new, whether you call it a paragraph or two paragraphs or new information? What is the rule of thumb with when you use the headings?
Sure. So general rule of thumb has been you want to think of it as an outline. Um,
Okay.
so if I open the docs demonstration, um, actually, you know what's going to be easier to explain this is if I open the newsletter. So the thing about headings is they tell people this is new content. So if you're writing a larger document, that's like, splitting into sections. If you have, one topic at the start, like saying, here is the Department of Disabilities Transportation or Housing Community Program, that one of our directors helps with. That would be the first topic. So that would receive heading 2. So heading 1 would be Department of Disability Services. Heading 2 would be that. Heading 2 would be uh, the Technology Assistance Program. And then we might break that down further under the Technology Assistance Program, Assistive Technology Program. I always say it wrong. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's because
Yeah,
anyway.
don't worry about it.
Yeah, but under there we would have maybe separate heading 3s for the different programs. So there would be like the loan service program, there would be the financial loan program that helps find
Okay. Mhm,
money for people to buy assistive technology or modify their vehicles for like a wheelchair access or something,
mhm,
or us as the IT access initiative.
mhm,
So each of those would be a separate heading under the assistive technology program heading to,
mhm.
to let people jump to those things. So topic changes would probably be your first starting
Yeah,
point. And then from there, if for whatever reason you need to break it down further, you can add the next level of headings. So a very simple
that's helpful.
document. Yeah. So
That's very
very,
helpful. I
yeah,
was
great.
thinking, so the headings, the different type of
Hmm.
heading, in some ways, not exactly, but it's like bullets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have the main bullet and then you have the next bullet that is indented. And then if you need to go even further, then it's indented even further. And
Yep.
so, okay, terrific. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I
No, no
just think of
problem.
a heading as the heading of everything, of anything,
Yeah.
it's like, this is too many
Yeah.
headings. Yeah. So,
Right, and that's the tricky part is that you don't want too many headings because then it's not service of point. Because something we usually see a lot is people using headings to add emphasis, especially on websites. And
yes.
then, well, if all your content is headings, you've kind of defeated the purpose because now they don't act as navigation points, which is the second
Okay.
thing that I should have mentioned was that a screen reader can navigate by heading and they can navigate by specific level of heading if they so choose.
Wonderful.
So that's why having a heading 1 to start your document is usually good practice because they have a jump point to get immediately to the top, but then they can go to each separate section with heading 2. Um,
Understood.
if you have a really large document, like if your agency is putting out like a resource guide or a data report each year or something, annual report,
Mhm.
that might get broken up with multiple level 1 headings for like major sections just because the sheer
Yeah.
size of your document. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, that's why like this outline Google Docs has on the left
Hmm.
is something I would, and Word
Yeah.
has this too. That's really where I point people to is think of it like that
Yeah.
because you want to think of it how am I breaking up my content into something that's really easy to understand.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. This
Of
was
course.
great. Thank you.
Great. You're welcome. All right. Do we have any other questions? Because we are at time. All right. I'm not seeing any. So if you do have questions, you can reach out to us. Um, our contact information is in the newsletter. I can also add our group email in the chat here. It's mdod.nva@maryland.gov. Um, we have regular monthly webinars. We have one tomorrow on how to read VPATs. That's a special presentation in collaboration with the NFB, National Federation of the Blind, and MSDE, the Department of Education. So if you're at all interested, you can check out that email that should have came out. That's just a direct link to the meeting. There's no registration required. Um, and uh, that is everything. Thank you everyone for attending. and reach out if you ever have questions. Stop the recording.